Salute, BookTube. Welcome back to my channel, The Saracen Salute. Still going strong, still early days, but slowly but surely racking up those videos. I hope you're enjoying them. I'm certainly enjoying doing this. For this video, I thought I'd continue to introduce myself. I guess that's only fair. Try to give you a better understandings of the books I read. So this video is kind of like an introduction to the books that I read. It's a video I've seen a couple of booktubers do. A lot of them do the newbie book tag. That one's really famous. But then there's also this introduction of the books I read, which is more personalized and goes through some of the books in my library and what I read, what I like to read, to give you a better idea of who I am and what I read. So what I did with this was I've got a bunch of books to show, and I don't want this video to go too long because my last video did go very long, so hopefully I can do this one in a much shorter time. But what I decided to do was to go through my library, and I've arranged my library in a way that it's pretty much divided into sections, into subject matter. Again, mostly, maybe I've added on the description, but it's mostly nonfiction, mostly history. But I do have a nonfiction, a fiction shelf, a couple of fiction shelves, and I've added a few fiction as well, also to give you an idea of some of the fiction that I read. But what I did, it's divided into different subjects, and what I did was I took a couple of books. It was hard narrowing it down, but a couple of books from each section of my library to give you, again, a better idea of what kind of books I read. So I'll go through the sections really quickly and then we'll get to the books. Those two shelves over there are ancient history. We might start with that. Actually, what I'll start with, and it's not on camera, it's on this side. So I've got this set of shelves, bookshelves over here, and then symmetrical to it I've got an identical shelf also packed with books. Maybe in a future video I'll film from the other side so you can get a view of this side. Over there I've got my children's books, books I read when I was a child. And as I've mentioned in my newbie BookTube newbie tag and in other videos, my reading history, it began as a kid reading, being quite a healthy reader. But then in my teenage years, secondary school or high school as the Americans call it, I sort of stopped reading. And then when I went to college, university, I got back into reading, and I've been reading ever since. So I still have a lot of my kids' books from my time when I first started reading. So I think I'll start with that as a genesis of my reading, and then I'll go through the shelves. So the children's, my childhood books are there. I took a couple just to show you what I used to read. And then, as I mentioned, the ancient shelves, I've taken a couple, I believe, one or two from the ancients. Here is what I call depends which angle you're coming from. If you're from a Western perspective, it's the medieval or Middle Ages. But in Islamic and Middle Eastern history, Arab history, it's the Golden Age. So that's what it is. It's we can say Golden Age or Middle Ages books, but mostly with a Middle Eastern bent. The next shelves, which are behind my head, but it's right over there, is my Gulf books related to the Arabian Gulf. I think in one of my videos I referred to it as the Persian Gulf, which was a mistake because, again, for those who don't know, I'm in the heart of the Middle East in the United Arab Emirates. That's where I'm filming from. That's where I live. It's very politically incorrect to call it the Persian Gulf. It's preferred to be called the Arabian Gulf, and it's a big controversy between Arabs and Persians about the semantics of the name. And it's funny, I'm filming this on the day that President Trump of the United States is expected to visit the region. He's going to Saudi Arabia, then Qatar, and then the UAE. So, and he's made a splash, and there's an expectation that he'll make an announcement that America will be changing the formal name of the Persian Gulf, because it's called Persian Gulf in most books, most atlases. I think on Google as well. On Google, it's Persian Gulf and then in brackets Arabian Gulf. But there's rumors that President Trump is going to come and he's going to formally call it the Arabian Gulf, and he's going to, I guess, dictate or mandate that all American books, atlases, etc., call it the Arabian Gulf. And that's going to create a bit of a storm, I think, especially on the Persian side from the Iranians. They're not going to be happy about that. But we'll see. But anyway, those books I have over there are from the Persian Gulf. So the area that I'm in, the United Arab Emirates and the surrounding region. And then if we continue to those books over there, those are also Middle Eastern books, but more modern Middle Eastern books. So mostly 20th century going forward. A lot of stuff about, the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the establishment of new Arab states. So a lot of books there on Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, that kind of stuff. The far shelf is actually one section that you can see it at the far end, is one that I didn't pick any books. Those books are mostly my others. So there's books about India, Japan, China, etc. A lot of those books are TBRs. I haven't read many of them. I also stuffed some travel books in there and also biographies of popular culture figures. Actors, singers, etc. Again, that's when I was younger, I used to pick up more, and I'm trying to sort of phase them out because I need space. I enjoy reading them, but I need space. So I'm trying to empty that out, trying to read them and flush them out of my library. But I haven't included them here because a lot of them haven't been read, and I didn't know which one to choose or which ones to talk about, and also in the interest of keeping the video at a manageable level. So maybe in another video I'll talk about those books, but just for that, it's not that it's not interesting, it's just time constraints, logistical reasons. And then we go back, so that's the end of this bookshelf, this side, and then as I mentioned, I've got the symmetrical bookshelves, symmetrical to those over there, parallel right over here in front of me, but I've actually set up my camera there so you can't see it. But here is more of my Western collection. Books about Europe, Britain, America, those three. When I say America, you can include some North American books as well, South American, Age of Discovery sort of stuff, when the blur the line between Europe and America, or the New World, in quotation marks. Also, my British history, a lot of it is mixed with a lot of sort of military, World War I, World War II, which I made a World War II video last, if you'd like to check it out. It's long, but if you like. There are some books also that cross over between Britain and the Middle East, and to a lesser extent America and the Middle East. It's hard to see where to put it. Do I put it in the Middle Eastern section, or do I put it in the British and American section? But because Britain and the British Empire became very involved in the Middle East, and then America in much more recent times, let's say since World War II, has been much more involved in the Middle East, there's a little bit of crossover there. And then there's the European books, as I mentioned. So I've taken, and fiction. Okay, and then the last shelves of fiction, I think I mentioned. Fiction books. I've also taken a couple just to give you an idea of what kind of fiction I do read. It's much less of my nonfiction, but I do read it from time to time. So again, I took books from each section, and I'm here to show you what I've pulled out. We'll start with my childhood books. I guess that's only appropriate to start from the beginning of my life. One book I pulled out, I haven't read since I was a child, but I still have it. It's by Roald Dahl. Danny, the Champion of the World. Again, very boyish, very laddish kind of book. But Roald Dahl was very big when I was young. Again, I think the British connection. Here, where I live, British books, British education to an extent, especially when I was younger. Although American influence, we could say, is increasing when it comes to schools and education, but the British ran the school, they ran the newspapers, they ran the books. So Roald Dahl was definitely one of them. Um, and yeah, again, this book. I opened it just before I started filming. It's kind of in a fragile state, and I'm scared to reread it in case something happens. But this is the proof. I mean, you can see it's pretty well loved, and I think I bought it new. So this is proof that I was reading when I was young, in case anybody's doubting. Uh, Another book I have, a little bit older, but still in my childhood, and again, well loved, so proof that I was reading, is very famous. It's William Golding's Lord of the Flies. Again, very laddish, very boyish kind of fiction. I think you know the story. It's very well known. It's a bunch of boys get not shipwrecked, but I think their plane crashes over some island, and only the teenage boys survive, and then all the conflicts that occur between the so-called stronger boys and the weaker boys, and the power struggles, and just very, very dense for for the term which didn't exist at the time, which is YA, young adult, I guess. Very young adult. So this is the copy I have again, very well loved. So again, proof. But I actually found a newer copy. I purchased it from a used book for really cheap, and it was almost new. So I probably, if I want to reread it, I haven't read it since my childhood. But if I do want to reread it, I'll probably refer to my new one, because this is going to fall apart if I do open it up and I want to save it. I just couldn't find the new one when I was looking for them. It's somewhere there, but definitely something. Maybe I want to go back to relive the childhood memories. So that's an example of my childhood books, the kind of books that I do read. We're going to switch now to the ancients. I think we'll try to do this in some kind of historical, chronological historical order. But I think important to start with the ancients. One book, again, Middle Eastern Ancient History. It's by George Roux, French author, and it's called Ancient Iraq. It's a Penguin, I think. Not the original edition, it's a paperback. I've actually got a hardcover of it as well, but again, this was easier to reach. George Roux was a French, I think, if I remember correctly, he's a medical doctor, if I'm not mistaken, not an archaeologist, not a historian. He's either a medical doctor, or he with the French Petroleum Company in Iraq, or he was a oil engineer. It's one of the, I don't remember the biography exactly. Maybe if there's a quick, George Roux, quick biography here. Let's see. Yeah, he pursued his Oriental studies side by side with his medical career. So he was a medical professional, a doctor, with the French Petroleum Company. He was based in Iraq, and he had his real passion was what was the word they used? Oriental studies, but he was fascinated by Mesopotamia and ancient civilizations, and he wrote probably the greatest primer on ancient Iraq so far, or one of. I think originally in French, this was translated into English, but very popular, and maybe a good starting point for anybody who wants to know more about ancient Iraq. Next, as an example, maybe a bit more Western, ancient, but more Western, one book that I read very recently, at the beginning of the year, I said I'm going to start going a bit, find some TBRs on my ancient history shelves that I hadn't read, and try to go through them, see which one I want to keep, which ones can probably go, because, again, space. This is by Adrian Goldsworthy. It's Caesar, biography of Caesar. Very well written. I'm not a big, when it comes to ancient, again, I prefer, because of my background, some of the more East Asian ancient empires. So Egypt, of course, Mesopotamia, as I showed. Rome and Greece, again, big in the Western world as the cradle of Western civilization, but for me, not my strong points. So I was happy to read this, and I actually read a few other Roman histories that I had with this, so I'm slowly learning much more about the Roman Empire than I previously had known. And this one was a highlight that stood out, well written. I mean, it's perhaps hard not to write a good biography of Caesar because of the life he led, a very fascinating life, whether you agree with him or think he was a dictator. Well, he was a dictator, but he divides opinions, but it's still exciting story, exciting life, and you know, one that's very important to understand Roman society at a time of great transformation. Adrian Goldsworthy is very famous. He's written many books about Rome. It's his specialty. I have another one which I read right after Caesar, which is Augustus, from revolutionary to emperor. But if I had to choose, I'd say, oops, it's upside down. I'd say the Caesar book is slightly better. I think we have more sources on Caesar. Caesar wrote an autobiography himself. He was a great propagandist, thinking of the future. Augustus was very much a man of the present, looking to hold on to power. I mean, of course, there are sources on Augustus, but a lot of the sources are, and the sort of writers that he encouraged in the Roman golden age of Roman literature and history, he sponsored, but they wrote grand histories of Rome, while Caesar was very much an expert PR person. The other thing, again, Augustus, I don't know if this is correct, but is a bit of a bit boring, not boring, but because he was so hell-bent on keeping power, he didn't, what's the word? I mean, his early days when he was climbing to become the first man in Rome is very exciting. But once he assumes power, he did very little to budge. He wasn't controversial at the least. Tried to toe a middle line just to keep power. So maybe not as interesting as Caesar, whose swashbuckling life began early and continued to his last days. But there's that. And then also, it's hard to read this as a standalone without reading this first, or unless you're well-versed in Roman history. It's better to probably read these two together, start with this and then go to this, because it is in chronological order. Augustus takes over after Caesar, but again, that depends on if you're a beginner like me, you probably have to do that. If you're more versed with Roman history, then you could probably read the Augustus on its own. Anyway, that gets us away from ancient, and then we go to the Middle Ages, and that's, when I say, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's the Middle Eastern Islamic Middle Ages, which was really a golden age. But I know I said it's Middle Age. I also put in there a lot of books that are Middle Eastern but non-Arab, so a lot of things about Ottoman Empire, a lot of things about Turkey, modern Turkey, not a lot, but a few, and stuff about Iran, Central Asia. I've just made that whole shelf, that section, things about the Caucasus, etc. But first, a good example, a book that I really like, that I really recommend. The blurb says an absorbing narrative, and I agree with that. It's really absorbing. It's by Barnaby Rogerson, and it's The Heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. The subtitle is a continuation of the title, and the roots of the Sunni Shiite split, or schism, in Islam. That's Arabic calligraphy, Arabic writing. It's the names of the 4 caliphs who succeeded the Prophet after his death. So there's Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and then Ali. And then, of course, it's Ali and his sons, of course. That's when the schism between the Sunnis and the Shias start, very early in Islamic history. But a really great book, really well written. In the English language, I haven't seen anyone better. And the fact that he focuses on them, he actually has, and I have it, I should have brought it. It's the prequel to this, which was his biography of Prophet Muhammad, which was good, but this is just another level. Again, it's the 4 successors after the Prophet, and that's a time of great growth in the Islamic Empire, the Islamic Arab Empire. When they began, I mean, when the Prophet died, they had controlled pretty much what is the Arabian Peninsula, Mecca, Medina, and the areas around it. But by the time these guys got through with their rules, their reigns, the Islamic Empire stretched from China to Spain. So really, really good. Can't recommend it highly enough. And actually, now that I know his name, like I said, I have his Prophet Muhammad biography. He has another book unrelated about, well, sort of related. It's a traveler's history of North Africa, which I picked up. And then recently he just published another book, again, about the Sunni Shiite split in Islam. More of a historical look, which is again exciting, which I haven't read, but I've got it, and it's on my TBR. And then, as I mentioned, yes, this is more Middle Ages, but just to show you the variety, because I mixed it with a lot of stuff. Another book on that shelf, which I read and greatly enjoyed, is by Andrew Mango, and it's Ataturk, biography of Ataturk, the founder of the Turkish Republic. A very fascinating figure, again, lived in fascinating times. Similar to Augustus in that the beginning of his history, his story, his life, his earlier days are exciting. His rise to power is very exciting. Of course, he resuscitated the Turkish Republic out of the rump of the Ottoman state. Nobody expected an Ataturk type figure to come and to be so successful, not the Western powers, not the least. And it was them who encouraged the Greeks to attack Turkey, or what was left of the Ottoman Empire, and take it for Greece. But they didn't know that there was an Ataturk there, and he pushed the Greeks back, and highly revered in Turkey. But this book is probably the best biography I've read. I've got a couple, but this one is definitely the best one. Again, the story, like Augustus, as I was saying, at the end, as he assumes power, kind of gets a bit boring in quotation marks, in that he's holding on to power and he's not moving the needle too much, straying a middle course. Turkey was neutral in the Second World War. He didn't get involved until I think very late. They just folded in with the Allies. Turkey eventually would join NATO, still is part of NATO. That's important considering what's happening between Russia and Ukraine these days. So still a relevant figure. But yeah, very interesting. His rise to power, his involvement in the First World War, his assumption of leadership in the Turkish-Greek War in the early 1920s, and then his establishment of the Republic. Fun stuff. Okay, so that gets us out of the sort of Middle Ages, Central Asian section of my library. Next, as I mentioned, is the Gulf section, the area of the world that I live in. I chose one book because these are very specialist. I don't know how interesting it is to other people. Where I live in the United Arab Emirates, the story is really one of ostentatious wealth, luxury, etc. And a lot of the books now are covering that kind of thing. But there are some very good histories and political narratives, political science type books about the emergence of the Gulf states. As you can see, I've got quite a big selection of those books, but I don't know how interesting it will be for a worldwide audience. It's very niche and it's very personal, I guess. But one book I'll recommend if anybody's interested is called Dubai, The Vulnerability of Success. And it's by Christopher M. Davidson. He's a well-known scholar of the Gulf. I don't think he's even allowed back in the Gulf. I think he made, his books make a bit of some controversial statements in a part of the world where free speech is still, let's just say, not as powerful as in Western countries. So he's a British academic based, I think, in Britain or somewhere in Europe now. He's written a bunch of books about the region, about the UAE, about Dubai, and this one is probably the book that put him on the map. He just talks about the history of Dubai, not the blingy Dubai, but Dubai when nobody knew what Dubai was, when it was a sleepy fishing village until the coming of oil. And he talks about the challenges that they face or may face in the future, and what that future might be. So again, if you want to get into that part of the world and understand this part of the world where I live, not a bad place to start. Although maybe one day I'll make a book about getting into make a video about books to get into the region, to understand the region better. I don't know if I just finished saying this might be a good starting place. Maybe not. Maybe this is a bit. Maybe I'm a bit biased because I've read so much about it and I know the history well. But you might need a bit of background if you really truly want to enjoy this. But there are some more beginner type books about the Gulf region that you could begin with. Maybe I'll make a video in a future date. So that gets us out of the Gulf. We'll go next to the modern Middle East. This is everything pretty much 20th century going forward. The fall of the Ottoman Empire, the establishment of Arabic states in the after World War I, the 1920s basically, and then going through to today almost. My fascination is really with the Middle East. There's a lot of books written about the 1920s and the establishment of Middle Eastern states by Western authors, because the West was very much involved, especially Britain, also France, but especially Britain. So a lot of T.E. Lawrence, a lot of just formation of the Arabic states. But then in the 1930s and 40s is an area which isn't as well covered. Just before World War II, and then the Middle East during World War II, and then it slowly picks up after World War II, especially with the resurgence of the Middle East's importance and the amount of oil in the region. And the ascension of America, of course. You start seeing books coming out, and all the wars between Israel and the Arab states, etc. But there's that period, 1930 to 1940, we can even say early 1950s, that is less well covered. And that's a shame. I mean, it is covered. There's plenty of books, but interest, the general public's interest, isn't as, maybe we can say, aware as others, as other periods, more recent history, or more, the formation and World War I, formation of Arabic states period. More is known about those periods because it was much more Western involvement, and there was that middle period where everything was in the air, anything could have happened, and that's a time in the last century of Middle Eastern history which I feel should be better known, especially because of the amount of I don't know if penetration, but amount of interest. I guess interest and penetration, involvement of the West in the Middle East. People tend to focus again on the early, just after the First World War and the formation of the Arab states, and they focus about the recent stuff, the 90s, 80s, 90s, and the 21st century. But then there's a bit of a gap there. So anyway. Probably one of the best books to understand the Middle East, in my opinion. I think very well written and very comprehensive, and a bit biased, we'll say, more of a pro-Arabic, pro-Arab stance to Middle Eastern history, is by Peter Mansfield, and it's The History of the Middle East. A seminal book. You can see I've got notes, sticky notes on it, just while reading, keeping a lot of notes. They've kind of crumpled because they've been on a shelf, but they're still sticking there. Seminal book. Anybody who wants to understand the Middle East should read this book. Peter Mansfield he's passed away now, but his books, this is the 4th edition. The book keeps getting updated with the new events in the Middle East, but the initial book that he wrote many years ago, I think originally in the 60s. Oh, sorry, first published in 1991. Okay, but he talks about the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, pretty much the first half of the 20th century in the Middle East. And then because he's passed away, it's been updated to take into account more recent events. But Peter Mansfield was a bit unique. He was a British embassy civil servant, British Foreign Service civil servant. He worked at the British Embassy, I want to say Beirut, might be Cairo, one of the Arabic countries, and he just disagreed with British policy. He saw what he called the hypocrisy or the double standards of the British, and as he saw the American involvement in the Middle East, and he spoke out about it. There's a lot of books about that are similar to this, why they hate us, etc. But Peter Mansfield is probably the best. The reason why there's a lot of animosity to the West in the Middle East. It's a good book to read, but keep in mind takes a pro-Arab stance. That's important to highlight. And then just to round off, there was a lot of choices, but I chose this one. It has a bit of a military twinge to it, but it's I think it's important to know. It's by Charles Townsend, and it's When God Made Hell. The subtitle is The British Invasion of Mesopotamia and the Creation of Iraq, 1914 to 1921. And this is again that period I told you that's well represented. The early 20th century and World War I. A lot of it is mentioned because there was British involvement and there was Western involvement directly. So a lot of books on this period, but this one is more of a military history. I have another book, I should have showed it, but maybe I'll show it in another video. But basically, this is the British campaign in Mesopotamia, today Iraq, during the First World War. And the title, When God Made Hell, tells you what difficulties the British faced when fighting. There was a famous British defeat in Kut in southern Iraq that slowed the British progress towards invading Baghdad. Eventually, the British would be victorious and would take over Iraq. But this book ends in 1921, and that's important because once the British were victorious in Iraq and they took it over, they didn't know what to do with it. The country was backwards. It was very split in terms of its ethnicities and its religious sectarianism, and there were Kurds and Arabs and Sunni and Shia and rich and poor, and it was a jumble to mess with, a jumble to deal with. And so they had trouble subduing it and eventually invading Iraq, Mesopotamia. And then in 1921, when they were eventually successful and in charge, they were at odds of what to do. There's, as I mentioned, Iraq is a very deeply fractured society and not very easy to govern. And so, I should have probably brought the other book other than this, but basically what happens is there was an uprising in Iraq, and it made big press at the time. If you read newspapers, British newspapers in the 1920s, there was an insurgency. The Iraqis fought the British, started killing them in the cities and towns of Iraq, all through Iraq, mostly in the south, but everywhere really. Very similar to what happened post-2003. Iraqi nationalists and Islamic national, I don't know, patriots fought the British. There was an insurgency. It was I won't get into the details, but again, maybe I'll make a separate video. But again, another example of the kind of books that are on that shelf. So with that, we finished pretty much this side. Okay, half an hour of my videos. So we're at the halfway point, but I'll try to make the second half much quicker. So this half is more Western histories, more European histories, British, American, and some fiction choices. So I'll do those now. So we're leaving the Middle East or the East and going to the West. The first set of my bookshelves are related to Britain, British history. just because as an English speaker, British history is going to be high up there with the number of books you could read. Again, where I live, a lot of British books. And especially if anybody's interested in 20th century Middle East, you have to understand Britain, because Britain and the British Empire was so important. So one example is a well-known book, one that I really enjoyed reading, although it's an obscure part of British history. That's the obscure for me. It's by Dan Jones, The Plantagenets, The Kings Who Made England. Big book, but very well written, even for somebody who's not into British history or steeped in British history like myself. This I heard about this in BookTube. A lot of booktubers that I respect and like watching mention this book a lot as being really good, and I think it launched Dan Jones. After that, he's written many other books about the Crusades, about the Middle Ages, this whole period. I think he goes into Henry V and Henry VIII and the Tudors. But this one, I think, really good reading if you just want something to. I read British history, or let's say medieval British or Middle Age British history, just as for fun, really. And this one definitely is fun. The other one we fly, jump a couple of centuries, still Britain, but a different subject for a different time. It's by Piers Brendan, and it's The Decline and Fall of the British Empire, 1781 to 1997. 1781 is the loss of America, and then 1997, I think, is Hong Kong, the return of Hong Kong to China, to mainland China, the return of the Hong Kong colony, I guess. It's actually been a while since I read this, but I remember it being very good. You get, again, I've got some sticky notes on it, but just to go through the table of contents to get a better understanding. Chapter 1, the world turned upside down, the American Revolution. And then chapter 2 goes to Britain's Indian Empire. So this quickly, America is swept off the stage, and then it becomes a British story, and an Eastern story, British Empire in the East mostly. So you have Britannia's Indian Empire, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, which is okay, not completely Eastern, and then the Far East and Afghanistan. Next chapter is Irish famine and Indian mutiny. Chapter 6, towards conquest in Africa. Chapter 7, Cape to Cairo. Chapter 8, the Boer War and the Indian Raj. Chapter 9, Flanders, Iraq, Gallipoli, and Vimy Ridge. We just mentioned Iraq. That's the Iraq, not the Iraq of Tony Blair and George W. Bush, the Iraq of the 1920s and the insurgency, the war, the Anglo-Mesopotamian War in 1920. Chapter 10, Ireland and the Middle East. And then chapter 11 is West and East. Chapter 12, Kenya and the Sudan. It keeps going. 13, the route of independence. That's Indian independence. 14 is Singapore and Burma. 15 is Ceylon and Malaya, which is Sri Lanka and Malaysia. 16 is the Holy Land. 17 is Suez invasion and the Aden evacuation. That's the Suez crisis with President Nasser in Egypt, and then the whole Yemeni civil war, which was a civil war but had many external parties. Chapter 18, the Gold Coast and Nigeria. Chapter 19, Kenya and the Mau Mau. 20 is Rhodesia and Central African Federation. Chapter 21 is the West Indies and Cyprus. And then chapter 22, which jumps really to much more recent times, is the Falklands and Hong Kong, which explains the later 20th century. But as you can see, a whole jumble of countries, but it's at the end of it's that where this is probably the most important. So very, very nice. It's really global history, but it's on my British section because the British are pretty much running the show during that whole sweep. So that's the Britain over and done with. We'll go to Europe. A lot of choices. What I chose was a bit of a keyhole history. It was hard to just find one subject about European history, choose one book, because I just choose one book, but to choose that one book was kind of difficult. But I settled on this. It's by Norman Davis, and it's The Vanished Kingdoms, big book. So the subtitle is The History of Half-Forgotten Europe. Um, Half forgotten Europe is, and the word vanished kingdoms are kingdoms which we read in history books, archaic history books, but which no longer last today. Um, Norman Davis sort of made his name as a historian of Europe that focuses on New Europe, or we can say Eastern Europe. He's got quite a few books about Poland, Czechoslovakia, those kind of places. And this book kind of covers that. It covers small Western, or not small, but long forgotten Western European kingdoms. Again, we'll go quickly through the table of contents. It might be big because this is a big book, but just as an example, Burgundia. I think it's the Duchy of Burgundy. Nobody remembers that. Aragon, now very much part of Spain. Burgundy, for those who don't know, is pretty much everything from the Netherlands and Belgium down to Switzerland, the borderlands between France and Germany. Aragon is Spain. Litva, which I think is Latvia. Byzantium. Borussia, which I think is Prussia, medieval Prussia. Galicia, which is I think in Poland now. Yeah, you get the idea. The other ones I can't even pronounce. They're that obscure, but again, big book. I wanted to give an example of European history, but nothing too generic. So this is really good. Okay, so we're out of Europe now, and we can go to America, American history. One book I have which I really enjoyed. Again, it's been a while since I've had this for a while, and it's been a while since I've read, but I remember it being just fantastic. It's by Jay Winnick, and it's The Great Upheaval. And the subtitle is America and the Birth of the Modern World, 1788 to 1800. So this deals with the American Revolution, the American Revolutionary period, but it takes a global view. You can see the American flag on the cover, but you can see the French flag. But I remember he goes into all kinds of. He even speaks about North Africa and the Barbary pirates, but also about the Wahhabi movement in Saudi Arabia, which sprang up at this time, but nobody really knew about it until oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia. But the American Revolutionary period with a global outlook. What happened, what the effects of the American Revolution were on Europe, on France specifically, on Britain and other parts of the world, or other parts of Europe, but also the world. What happened, the effect on Spain and South America. Just really, really good history, and very well written. Again, big, but worth your time. That's so America's first burst onto the scene with the American Revolution, and as an independent republic, there was certainly a movement that said, that had pretensions of global domination, but that quickly receded. I don't know why he ended it at 1800. I don't recall why, but 1812, I think, played a part. The War of 1812, because really after that, America receded, went back to its isolationist. It swings between times of isolationist or strong global involvement, and then isolationism, and then back and forth. So I think at the beginning there was, like I said, dreams of imperial grandeur and global grandeur, but America eventually would recede. They would focus on Western expansion, didn't get involved in the Napoleonic Wars, and it wasn't really until the 19th century, and then definitely the 20th century, when America comes back with a vengeance. But yeah, that whole period, the 19th century, America was very inward looking and westward expansion. And they didn't have wars to fight around the world. They fought each other in the Civil War. But again, very, very, very good book. And then finally, for the American, I took a second example from my American bookshelf, and this is by this is a book. It's a biography of a president, but it's more than that. It's a president in his times. I thought it was really good, really, really good. And I've heard that there are other biographies about this president that are probably better, but this one is more involving, and it's somebody should make a Netflix. I'd like to make a Netflix show about this. It's by Candace Millard, and it's Destiny of the Republic. The subtitle is A Tale of Madness, Medicine, and the Murder of a President. And that's the president, and that's President Garfield. Nobody, I don't know if anybody knows who President Garfield is or was. I didn't know. I mean, I had heard his name, but because he was murdered quite early in his administration, he sort of doesn't make big ripples in American history. But the story of the assassination and what happened before, what happened after, he was really a great man by any stretch. He would have probably been in the top 5, top 10, I don't know about top 5, maybe top 10 lists of American presidents if he had stayed longer. But because he was tragically killed, not too many people know about him, but this is really well written. And Candace Millard, she's gone on to sell many books. She has a book on Churchill. She has a book about the Amazon. She has a book about. She's got many books. But I think this really made her. This is really, really good. I want to reread it now just by bringing it up. But yeah, so that covers my the American bookshelf. Okay, 47 minutes. I don't know, this is becoming embarrassing, but maybe I should have divided this into 2 videos. But anyway, what I have left are two shelves, 2 subject matter shelves. One of them is going back to here. Those are my sports books. For my sports books, I wanted, and then the last 2 are fiction. So I'll get to fiction for the end. But 2 books I chose. Again, I don't know how interested people are on football or soccer books. It's sports shelves, but it's mostly soccer, football, a little bit of tennis. But this one is called 5,000 to 1, and it's by Rob Tanner. The subtitle is How We Beat the Odds to Become Premier League Champions. This is a story of Leicester City, I think in 2015. A very undistinguished team, a very low budget team, no stars, went and shocked the world when they won the English title. And the title refers to the odds at the beginning of the season. They were 5,000 to 1 to win. And Rob Tanner, I think, was the local journalist at the newspaper in Leicester, the city where Leicester City Football Club plays. And he just recounts. It's just his recollection of that crazy year and what it did to the city, and it's really good. And then this one I haven't read, but I just put it here to give you an example that it's not just about football and recounting seasons or whatever, but this one is by it's by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg, and it's called The Club. The subtitle is How the Premier League Became the Richest, Most Disruptive Business in Sport. So this is sport and business. It gets into politics, especially these days. Football and politics have really meshed together, and controversially so. But this discusses how the English Football League went from pre-90s was a basket case of a league. It was riddled with poor stadiums, hooliganism. The British fans, the English fans, but English, were known for their very rowdy behavior. So rowdy that there were tragedies. People died in stadiums, stands collapsing, stampedes, that kind of thing, and tragic. So it was so bad that the other European countries, the German league, the Italian league, the French league, the Spanish, kicked the English out and said, we don't want you or your fans. We don't want you playing intercontinental championships. We're scared for our safety because of your the poor state of your league, basically. So for all the 80s, they were kicked out, and then the British sat down and said, "We need to improve. We need to fix this. We need to come back stronger." And they did. They reformed the league. They made the stadiums very family friendly. No more hooliganism. I think they banned alcohol sales, and then they also renegotiated TV deals. They started bringing foreign players. They really reformed the league, and then the English Premier League, starting in the 1990s, just became the most popular, the richest football league in the world. It's still the case now, and now it's become very corporate, but that's a different matter. But again, I haven't read this, actually. I love the subject matter, but I haven't read it. But I look forward to reading it very soon. Maybe I'll let you know how it goes. And I put it there just, again, to show you what I mean when I say sports books or football/soccer books. It's not just, season reviews. Okay, and then finally, we'll just close this out. We'll do it for under an hour. Again, apologies. I don't know how healthy this is to have this long videos for an early booktuber like myself. It's not gonna help my viewer count. But anyway, some fiction. This is BookTube made me do it. I would have never read this if it wasn't for BookTube. It's Evelyn Waugh, Brideshead Revisited. I found this in a used bookstore. It's a TV show cover. Apparently very popular TV show. It became a popular TV show based on the book. Very well written. Evelyn Waugh is the reason why I'm scared to write fiction, because I've even writing 1.01%, having the writing talent 0.01% of the writing talent that Evelyn Waugh has still wouldn't be enough. He's really a master of prose, and there's a reason why not everybody in the world is an author. And it's because some people write better than others, and Evelyn Waugh definitely one of them. A very good book. Basically about a family, an aristocratic family in the decline. If my memory serves me, during the First World War era. You can see a bit of the aristocratic house that they live in the background, and all the trials and tribulations I go through. Well-known classic. I don't think I'm offering anything new when I describe it, but if you haven't read it, you should. And then one book I also put, just to give you a bit of variety. It was a cheap edition of the book I bought new, but it was cheap. But it's really well done because it's a leather bound, and the paper is really good. It's Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it's Tarzan of the Apes and The Return of Tarzan. The word is anthology, I believe, an anthology of the two books in one, with this leather bound. Now look at the artwork on the title, I think it's the same at the back. Yeah, really nice. Oops, there's something here. Okay, this is a ticket to the Egyptian, one of the exhibits at the Egyptian Museum. Don't know why that's there, but it is. Very good. Edgar Rice Burroughs. There's a whole suburb of Los Angeles that's named after this author. That's how well regarded he is in American literature. So again, I doubt it's anything nobody has heard of, but it just gives you an example that I don't just read nonfiction. I do read fiction, and if you do have any fiction recommendations based on the introduction I gave you about the books I read, maybe historical fiction or any other fiction, if you can get me into science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, please sing out in the comments. Let me know. I keep an open mind. That's another reason. I think I didn't mention it in my BookTube video, my BookTube newbie tag. One of the reasons I also started this channel was to try to broaden my reading, try to get into more fiction. And again, any recommendations would be highly, highly appreciated. But yeah, okay, under an hour, but still too long. My apologies. Thank you if you made it this far. I'll see you on the next video. Salute, BookTube.